Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this really important discussion. I'm Sarah Duncan. I'm the Executive Director of United Way Aroostook, and I think we're just going to start by introducing ourselves around the room.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so glad that United Way is convening these meetings across Aroostook County. We had a great one in Holton this morning, and we'll be in Fort Kent at 1 o'clock on Friday afternoon. So if you know people up in the valley who could benefit from this information, please pass that along. My name is Jason Garrett, and I have the pleasure of working with the fine folks here at ACAP.
I am Robin Cooper here from Framework Church.
I'm Marilyn Bouchard here from Framework Church.
I'm Melanie Tompkins. I'm running for State House, and I'm also a social worker by day, so.
I'm Hollywood, Chair of the Westfield Board.
I'm Shelley Bonner, I'm the Chair of the
I work for Hope and Justice.
Sue Powers, Director of Strategic Initiatives for ACAP.
Sherry Locke, I'm the Chief Administrative Officer here at ACAP.
I'm Carrie Nelson. I'm the HR manager here at ACAP.
Jordan Medor, I'm the Regional Rep for Senator Angus King here in Aroostook County.
Pastor Mark Carter, Old Fashioned Revival Center and Play.
Greg Moody with the Agency on Aging.
Andrew Blackstone, one of the pastors at State Road Church.
Jennifer DeShan, University Credit Union, and also our chair of the United Way.
Don Roberts, Airport Hospital Community Health, and also a member of the United Way Board. Melissa Lazard, Bangor Daily News, and Star Hill.
Jason Blake, lead pastor at Framework Church.
I'm Melissa Runche. I'm the Energy and Housing Coordinator here at ACAP.
Josh Tate, I'm also at State Road Church.
Well, thank you so much again for coming. We really wanted to bring people together because we're predicting that this winter is going to be very difficult. United Way Aroostook, our goal is to look at the communities and find the needs and work to help solve these problems. This year, we did a new strategic plan where we decided to pick 3 crisis areas that Aroostook County is facing, and we identified the childcare crisis, heating, utilities, and hunger as being some of the major impact areas that we have. 2 years ago, we did the first ever study of the people that live in Maine that are living, paycheck to paycheck, and they're working. So we call these people ALICE, asset limited, income constrained employed. And these are the individuals that are above the federal poverty line, but they have no savings. They are living paycheck to paycheck and having to make the decision on basic necessities. So it's quite alarming what we found. In our current data is 2022, 17% of Aroostook County is at or below the federal poverty line with a state average of 12%. So we are above the state average. For ALICE population, and these people are working. These are the people at the grocery store, your CNAs, the essential workers. We are at 29%. So when you put that together, 46% of Aroostook County residents cannot meet their basic necessities. This is alarming when you look at that. And going into the heating season, with some significant changes, we're really worried about what our community is going to be facing. So I am so pleased to have you all here so we can all come together, hopefully work together to help make sure that the residents here are taken care of.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge we have United Way board members here in the room and yourself, the great leading work that United Way is doing on the 3 new fronts of your strategic plan, which include what we're here to discuss today, but also on the challenges around childcare in Aroostook County and United Way really leading work around a child care resource center. I know Melanie here is involved in that effort, Sue Powers as well, as you and your board and other community stakeholders really taking the lead around that issue. And I think some really positive, productive things are on the verge of happening and are happening right now as a result of that leading work, and certainly on food insecurity as well, which the folks in this room I know altogether too well is a very real and persistent challenge in our community. So I'm very proud as a former board chair myself of United Way and a long supporter of the agency to say thank you to you and to all of you with United Way and other agencies in here that are collaborating to make sure that really good things are happening in the midst of some of our greatest challenges here in Aroostook County that we're finding opportunity. So we are here today to talk about what we really, and again, I was just earlier today on Maine Public Radio's Maine Calling program to talk about this very issue. And my first question that I was asked by the host is, you're calling this a crisis, and in fact, how can you substantiate that? So generally, I'm a very glass half full person, and I really do feel like, thankfully, we are in a very supportive community here in Aroostook County where neighbors look out for each other, and that's certainly going to need to be the case this particular winter. But what my team and I here have done is we looked at comparison data to prior to the pandemic and to this current season to really compare apples to apples in terms of what we sort of see are the challenges that we'll be facing Aroostook County households this winter. Why did we sort of exclude the last 3 heating seasons from that comparative analysis? I'll share with you. For the 2021-22 heating season and 2022-23 heating season, there were subsidy payments that came in. So for people on the home energy assistance program, for example, there was a benefit payment that came in that essentially doubled whatever their allocation was in that season up until that point. In addition to that, the state legislature passed LD3 at the beginning of 2023, at the very beginning of the year. So in the latter half of that heating season, households that were vulnerable but not eligible for programs like the Home Energy Assistance Program had the opportunity to get a one-time $800 payment. And the reality of the circumstance is that here in Aroostook County, as with all community action agencies that were administering these dollars, we were told whatever wasn't spent by the 1st of July of 2023 would be clawed back into the state's general fund. So being good stewards of those dollars here in Aroostook County, when we had not had the calls for need on those funds, we actually reached out to households that we knew were vulnerable, households that rely on us for fuel assistance, both those that were slightly over income and those that were within the income guidelines for programs, and made sure that we got all of those dollars out the door. So the reason I say that is that set us up relatively well, or better than otherwise we would have been, for the heating season that we just ended, or that we ended in the spring, the 2023-2024 season. As I'm looking ahead, as our team is looking ahead to the 2024-2025 heating season, there is no such bounce heading into this season. There are no indications at this point that there will be a supplemental payment in the Home Energy Assistance Program. And there does not appear to be at this point a pathway forward for additional federal dollars to be placed into the Home Energy Assistance Program. So essentially, we are falling back to funding levels for that program in the 2019-2020 season before March 15th, when we all know the world changed, and then additional supports were quick to follow as it relates to that. But just what I've done for you here in this packet with the help of both our Home Energy Assistance Program team and our data analyst at ACAP is to really show you what the differential is on an average household of 4 here in Aroostook County. And some of the statistics certainly ring true for seniors as well, but for the purposes of home heating and the like, we base this on a family of 4. If I look back at that heating season, the average cost of heating fuel oil per gallon that season was $2.65 per gallon. Our predictive analytics tell us that this year it could reach an average of $4.50. I did meet with officials from Dead River the other day, and they indicated that they're seeing more positive signs that don't look that it will go that high. The price of oil has fallen a little bit in New York, and that was a positive indicator, as Melissa pointed out to me in our Holton meeting. For our households, however, who heat with outside fuel tanks that require kerosene, this number could very well ring true, and if it does reach that level for those that don't require kerosene, then those folks would be even more challenged And of course, many of our most vulnerable households here in Aroostook County find themselves in that position with above ground storage. If you look at what that meant for an average heat benefit, and I'm going to sort of explain this without trying to get overly wonky here. In 2019, 2020, when this agency was working on about 6,000 applications and about 4,700 of those homes actually qualified federally for the program. We were looking at an average benefit for an Aroostook County household for that program of about $722 for a heating season. Now, I caution everybody to remember that the Home Energy Assistance Program is just that. It's an assistance program. It's intended to be a supplement, and it's not intended to replace the entirety of the cost of the burden of heating for a household in the course of the year. Fortunately, for many of our households in not this immediate past season, but in the 2 seasons prior, the additional supplemental payment and additional opportunities to access additional benefits as a result of the pandemic did allow many households to get by, in some cases, with the entirety of their heating season shouldered by this program. Not, again, the intent of the program, but the reality of what we were seeing in the funding environment then. If you look at it today, and Melissa's going to share with you about some of the challenges we have coming into this season as it relates to a cap on the number of households that we're able to allocate fuel assistance to, because the program literally the last 2 years has run out of money. We are looking at a predicted average benefit per household of $550. And my team tells me that that's about the average of what's been coming back. We have been processing applications since the middle of July. Our intake team and our certifiers have been doing that work since the middle of July. The first benefit letters are starting to roll out to customers who had the earliest program appointments in the season, and they are calling us very concerned because they're seeing that their benefit has declined drastically, and we're trying to educate them through that process. And that's the purpose for this, a primary purpose for this meeting today, is to help you understand what they are seeing and what we are experiencing as well. If you look at where we are at, because of the cost of living and the life, where you had many households, particularly households with senior citizens, who would do what they could, whatever they needed to do to get by, making sometimes drastic and awful decisions like splitting medication or foregoing taking medication or choosing heat over eat, which is something we certainly don't want to see folks do. But even those households in the last few years, because of the cost of living, have had to turn to our agency for assistance. And the number of individuals qualifying for the Home Energy Assistance Program this past season, compared to the 2019-2020 season, grew by almost 3,000 households, from 4,707 to 7,551. That's the number we're sort of capped at this year, as Melissa will explain before. So you see at the bottom calculation of each of those, we've also factored in the cost of groceries, for example. An average cost for a family of 4 back in 2019, 2020, that winter was just under $200. That's increased by 33% to $300. So if you look on the income side of the equation for our households who live off of Social Security, particularly our vulnerable seniors, their average monthly benefit, in fact, has increased, but on average by about $300. And that's certainly right there alone, really not keeping pace with the cost of the grocery increase alone. So heating aside on the table, it's a very challenging environment for those folks. And then our cost calculations indicate, with the heat benefit factored in, that an average household here in Aroostook County, a family of 4, had an energy burden in dollars of $1,648 in that season going into the pandemic. Whereas this season, that is anticipated to be about a $3,000 household expenditure. And certainly any revenue or income in the household has not kept pace to that extent for the most part. And I certainly don't need to share that with all of you, as we're all experiencing that regardless of our socioeconomic background in terms of our household budgets. So I share all of this to you not to, to bring the mood down in the room, but to certainly bring an understanding and the perspective of the reality and quite frankly, the gravity of the situation as we all go into this heating season. And I know our team is concerned. I know that we are receiving phone calls from individuals who are concerned. I shared this in the Holton Forum as well. For our energy assistance program team, as much as you may think that the months of December, January, and February might be the hardest and take the greatest toll on our staff in terms of calls for emergencies and the like, and those are brutal months. The month of October has always been the greatest concern from my perspective because it really is the donut hole, what I call the donut hole in Aroostook County. In October, there is no recourse for our households who need to turn up that thermostat. There is no accessibility to the federal home energy assistance program until the 1st of November. And unfortunately, and as I shared, even though our most vulnerable households, because we are required to see in the first 180 days of the program, which starts in the middle of July, we are required to see in the first 180 days all of those who are considered the most vulnerable for hypothermia. So our households with seniors and our households with young children under the age of 6 years old. So we're feverishly processing all of those applications. And in some cases, it feels like to those customers to a certain extent in vain, because even though the work is done, we've dotted all our I's, crossed all our T's, and verified them for eligibility. The federal funds do not get released until main housing in such a time that the first payments do not go out until usually on either side of the Thanksgiving holiday. Sometimes just before, sometimes just after. So it really leaves no recourse. So in the past, historically, with funds like we've been fortunate to raise in partnership with United Way and WHEM on the telethon, we have reserved a certain amount of money, typically about $30,000 from that effort from the previous season, to give us a cushion going into this season to ensure that there's money available so that we don't have people really freezing in their homes, even in the month of October. In the 30s this morning, so we're already on trajectory for cold start.
I had 5 requests today.
Yeah.
For emergency fuel,
So not the first 5, but 5 today.
just today.
Yeah, and they are gut wrenching calls, correct? Melissa, this is probably the best time to sort of turn it over to you. I know you were telling us one of the stories on the drive down tonight about an elderly individual household that hasn't had fuel oil in their tank for 3 months.
And it's a boiler, so it heats their water. And unfortunately, we cannot call a no hot water situation an emergency based on the guidelines. So no water at all is an emergency, but no hot water is not. But that's why we have those funds available. So if somebody that's elderly and is a hypothermic risk calls us and says, I haven't had any hot water in 3 months, we can at least help them a little bit to get them through.
So I'll let you continue, Melissa, on there are some positive developments in the home energy assistance program this year, some challenging ones as well. And I'll let you detail those for the folks here in the room.
Sure. So there is a cap of 7,551 applications that we can do this year that will be paid a benefit. We can do more. Those people will be placed on a wait list, and there's no guarantee that they will receive a benefit. Last year, everybody that was placed on a wait list, they were able to be paid just, I believe, last month. So everyone on that wait list did get a benefit, but they were very clear that it is not a guarantee. Had we done the program normally and did not have a cap placed on us for applications, and we saw the same percentage of growth, then this year's average benefit would probably be around $330. But they are capping it so that the benefit is pretty close to the same as it was last year. So that, while not a big win and certainly not enough to sustain somebody through the winter, it's still better than $330 for someone. We do have an online application this year, which is going to make things a lot easier, especially for working households. People that can't take time out of their day, Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 to come into the office, take a day off, sit here for, half an hour and do an in-person application. They can do it from their home. I know that there's some technology barriers, especially sometimes with elderly. We're asking, when we have these people on the phone that want an appointment, we can't book something for them until February. We're saying you have a neighbor, a friend, a nephew, a child, somebody that can help you navigate that online application. Then they don't have to wait. And the sooner they get the application done and they give us their documents, that's one huge thing is documentation. We need it within 20 days, 20 business days of the signed application. If we miss paperwork and we're requesting it and we don't get it, then we end up having to deny them and having to do a new application. So it's so important that if you have friends or if you hear of people that are having trouble applying or that are applying, to really stress that it's important for them to get all their documents in.
Are they able to submit copies of those documents with the online application?
Yes.
Okay.
It's completely a full self online application and you can do it from your phone, take pictures of your documents and just fill the whole thing out, saves your progress. So if you are missing one and you need to go find it, it'll save your progress next time you log in. One really big thing with the online application is probably, I would say 80% of our calls are people asking for a status update. Where am I in my application? Was it approved? They can log in and get a real-time update on that application to see where they're approved. Is it pending? Is it certified? We really do our best, and I'm so big on customer service. We try so hard to answer every call. It's impossible, especially this year since we've had our internal staff budget cut by quite a bit. We don't have the staffing numbers, even from last year, to answer those phone calls. So the online application is going to be really important for people. So, we're just asking, like, maybe if you have constituents, people that go to your church or friends or neighbors, maybe if people could help them. It's so simple. It's so user-friendly.
Is the online application specific to people who are serviced by ACAP or is it a statewide?
It's statewide.
Statewide, correct.
So, and it gets filtered to each community action agency by zip code.
Oh.
So it'll automatically pop up into our system. And it is individual email addresses. So you can't use one email address and sign up 10 people. They each need their own separate email. But I mean, good Gmail's free and takes about 2 minutes to set one of those up. So that's a huge benefit. The other thing that we're doing this year that's exciting is our comprehensive services agency intake. So somebody comes in the door, instead of having them come back over and over again for all of our different programs, bringing paperwork, filling out applications for different programs, they're going to one person who's no longer a HEAP intake. They now are agency intake. So they work for ACAP, not for heating assistants. So they are going to ask all sorts of questions in an agency intake. Are you employed? Are you looking for unemployment? Receiving employment services? Do you have children? Do you receive WIC services? We've been scheduling our appointments, people with small children, on the same day as WIC clinics so that we can bring somebody right over to WIC and get them services right away. So that it's really a lot easier for us. We're able to help people, and then it's easier for the customer. They don't have to keep coming back and get the frustration of having to bring, their driver's license 8 times and talk to different people on the phone, try to get through.
About the emergency process.
Oh, yes, ESIP. So our emergency, on top of the donations, we do have our ESIP program, which doesn't start until November. The customer is applying for HEAP. They do need to be HEAP approved in order to get this. And I believe it's $750, up to $750 that they are eligible for emergency fuel. They have to have a quarter of a tank or less. And we try to get oil to them as quickly as we possibly can. It has to be within 2 business days when we place the order to when they get the delivery. We have a new process for that as well, where people call in, they can speak to anybody in the agency and at least get on that list. But again, that doesn't start till November. That doesn't help people that are calling now for emergency fuel.
One of the key things that when we brought a similar group of stakeholders, some of you at the table several years ago in partnership with United Way again, that we stressed and we really see as critically important this year because the volume of calls is going to increase to all of you as the level of funding has decreased and more people are finding themselves in need. We have developed the process and it's by no means perfect, but it's intended to ensure that we are providing the first and most available form of need first, in using the precious dollars that a number of you contribute to the organization, whether it's personally through things like the telethon or organizationally or through your church, we vet anyone calling us in an emergency situation out after November 1st to ensure that if they're eligible for that emergency crisis intervention program, that we utilize those dollars. Those dollars used to go a number of years ago, largely unspent in Aroostook County, which is just awful. And in recent years, Aroostook County, because of this work that we've been able to do in partnership with you, has had to go back and draw down more of those funds, whereas other agencies aren't accessing them or able to access them for people in Aroostook County. So we've had reallocations of those funds that have been made available here in Aroostook County because of our ability to streamline those efforts. We try from a customer service perspective, as you just heard Melissa say, we are actually being asked to process almost 3,000 more applications with fewer staff than we were processing applications with just a few years ago, which is a huge challenge for us. Melissa shared about our comprehensive intake. In addition to making that a better experience for the customer, that's a far more efficient process, and it's going to take us a few years to gain all of those efficiencies within the organization. But if you can imagine, we had 6 different staff members representing different programs asking the 10 to 15 core same questions that they needed for each one of these programs. And through our comprehensive intake, now that is more work on our staff because in many cases, our funding sources have not necessarily obliged to that and they have not come along in terms of the interoperability of programs. So staff members having to enter data into our central data system called Empower, and then having to enter it into the proprietary software that the funding source is requiring us to use. But at the end of the day, Heidi goes in and we get a call from a customer that is calling us, and I said, we've called 10 times for fuel. All of that is documented. In addition, with our phone system, it actually shows how many times we got calls from that phone. People in a panic situation, they're really elevated in many cases. And so we try to say, okay, well, we've worked with you on this. This is what we're missing from you. So anybody can basically see in those case notes what is missing so that we don't have to rely on that getting caught as a cog in the wheel of communication within our agency to try to say, who served this customer? What do we need? What have we already done with this customer? The other piece that I think is important to share, and again, that we shared in Holton, is the residual impact, unfortunately, of the fact that in previous seasons prior to the last 2, believe it or not, there was still money left on the table in the state of Maine through the Federal Home Energy Assistance Program every year. It wasn't a huge balance, but there was a balance there. What would be done with those funds is that they would either they'd be rolled over into one of 2 housing related programs that are connected to energy. One being weatherization. So we were fortunate to receive weatherization from the Department of Energy, but this particular weatherization is funding that comes through the heat fund and would be rolled over, allowing us to do more weatherizations in Aroostook County. With the dry up of heat funds and no balance to carry forward, unfortunately, that reduced the dollar amount available for weatherization. Was supposed to be no big deal because we all heard about the bipartisan infrastructure law that passed that was going to bring about 4 times the amount over the next couple of years of investment into weatherization into Aroostook County homes. Unfortunately, most federal laws do, there was a quirk in that law that capped our ability to work on any home in Aroostook County at $8,600. Now, $8,600 to weatherize in the extent that we're required to weatherize a home in Aroostook County is not nearly enough. We average between $12,000 and $16,000, especially on some of these larger farmhouses that are in the most need of older farmhouses that are in the most need of weatherization services. Typically, how our process works is every year at the end of the home energy assistance program season, based upon the customers that we have served, those that are of most vulnerable status, again, your elderly folks, your families with young children, those who have the highest energy burden and the highest reliance on the program are spit out from that program in a prioritization list of whose homes we're going to weather from Benedicta to Allagash. We work down that list pretty much in the order that those homes are in crisis for us, in that order. And on average, in the 9 years I've been with the agency has been able to do about 60 home weatherizations a year. A very comprehensive process. We replace necessary windows, doors. We do a lot of energy sealing. We send a crew in prior to the work to do a blower door test to see how energy inefficient the home is, and are required to go in at the end of the work that a contractor has done to verify that they have gotten it within the energy efficiency guidelines. And until they do, it's at their expense to go back and keep doing that and making sure that we hit those targets. Right now, to hit that level, that minimum threshold of $8,600, we're having to skip down that list to be able to go do smaller homes and homes on that list that we know that for certainty we can do that work for $8,600 or less and be able to hit those targets. So there's a consequence to that funding that's no longer there in heat to provide the balance of payment for a house like that or like those in Aroostook County with those weatherizations. So we by no means have stopped that work, but we've had to be more targeted about how we do that work. The response from state and federal government entities that we've had conversations with about that is that it's a requirement that if we're to do larger homes like that, that we have to find non-federal resource matching dollars to be able to weatherize those homes. We right now do not have enough matching dollars to be able to pay to help heat those homes for emergency fuel assistance. So any emergency fuel funds that we receive, unless they're specifically designated to weatherization, are going to go to emergency fuel assistance. Our development team here continues to look at opportunities and scours any resources that we can to be able to find potential matching funds, and we continue to have those conversations with state and federal policymakers, but it is a very real situation for us.
Well, the other issue too is that our central heating improvement program is funded by HEAP dollars. And that's a program that can replace a furnace or boiler or repair a furnace or boiler or an oil tank at no cost to the customer that receives heating assistance. So that money is also getting cut. We used to be able to do cleanings to make sure that everybody's furnace was in good working order so that the repair or replacement didn't have to be necessary down the line. Well, we can't afford to do those anymore. So you're seeing that effect where they're not getting cleanings for 5, 6, 7 years. Then they need a repair or replacement. And it's getting harder and harder for us to be able to fund just doing those because it comes directly from the heating assistance dollars.
So you can see the challenge is manifold and great. I will say though, on the, one of the positive developments that we've been able to do, and we were just actually on a call in between our Holton Forum and our Presque Isle Forum with Maine Housing related to the deep administrative cuts that we've been asked to burden this season with home energy assistance program. And one of the areas we discussed, which has been quite frankly a ray of sunshine in the work that we do with Aroostook County households, is as it relates to what's called the Assurance 16. Again, this is a bit wonky, but the home energy assistance program at the federal level has 16 assurances. I won't bore you with the first 15, but the 16th one is set with a goal that agencies who administer HEAP like ACAP have two primary responsibilities, which is to help a household reduce their overall energy consumption, and secondarily to reduce that household's reliance on programs like heat and the need for external heating assistance in their homes. Thanks to the pioneering work done by Heidi and many on her team here at the agency, and our adoption of what we call the whole family approach here at the agency, we've been able to take these Assurance $16 that we lend and grade with Head Start, where there are families with young children involved, with workforce development dollars and the like. And what we are able to do is through the Assurance 16 funding specifically, is we have a navigator or a family coach that works with the household. They go into the household, bringing members of our housing team as needed to do a basic home weatherization. So we are able to provide them with an energy efficiency kit that includes things like a low floor shower head, pipe insulation, fitting for plastic windows, things of that nature, and help them with the installation of those products. At the same time as they enroll in that program and they participate in that program, as they advance through that program, they're required to take financial literacy courses that would help them with their household budgeting and making very challenging decisions around their household budgeting. They're connected with workforce development with the hope of getting their families and their households into education, training, or into employment. In so doing, they're also connected with our early care and education area to see if we can get them into a Head Start or early Head Start program or child care program if they're not eligible for that program. To be able to really wrap them around in those services. And as they achieve milestones in those programs, for example, as they complete the energy efficiency component of that program with their coach, they have the option to receive a $100 credit to either their electric bill or their fuel bill, again, outside of their traditional HEAP allocation. And then when they complete the financial literacy component of that class, they are as well. That has involved some really pioneering and cutting edge work on the part of our agency, because the first year that we submitted a plan to do that type of work, we were rejected. It was not part of the state plan for Maine housing. So we thankfully brought together our colleagues in community action around the state, looked at other various state plans, including Connecticut, Indiana, and Mississippi in particular, and collectively worked with Maine Housing to get them to adopt a plan very similar to the state of Indiana's that allows us to do more case management, or in our case, family coaching work with the household to really look at all of the challenges that that household is facing, which is consistent with our new comprehensive or agency intake approach that Sue Powers, Melissa, Heidi, and others at the agency have really worked very hard to incorporate. So I'm going to stop there because we've shared a lot of information with you. And we, again, have not done that in sort of the spirit of trying to say, there are challenges. There certainly are challenges, but in true Aroostook County fashion, what we're hoping to do is to raise awareness. As we all know, the neighbor to neighbor thing here in Aroostook County is very real. One of the things that 8 years ago, when we held stakeholder groups just like this, became sort of a leading example for other parts of the state is our ability to coalesce around social service agencies, faith-based groups, municipalities around this room to be able to ensure that we were all pointing people in the same direction and accessing necessary federal programs first before we tapped into obviously what we see are shrinking donor resources, because even the individuals who would have given to telethon and fuel donations in the past are finding themselves in a position where they themselves are seeing increased household expenses, and their giving is impacted as well. And then fundamentally as well, and I'm very happy to have Jordan here in this room to raise attention and to call attention to the fact that, you know, that there are very limited resources available here, and certainly in the environment in Washington, D.C. And as an aspiring state representative coming in, you know, the possibility of another LD3 or something to that extent, we recognize that resources are not infinite here in the state or in the federal government. But many of the households and individuals who we rallied as government and as individuals to support as vulnerable households through those two very critical years of the pandemic environment are those that are going to suffer the most now that that funding has been taken away. Certainly recognize that that level of funding is unsustainable, but the reality is we're still living with a very real financial hardship that has not gone away. Whether the public health emergency has or not is obviously it's still with us, but not to the extent that it was. I think it's very important that we understand that our most vulnerable neighbors and friends are going to be challenged this winter season.
Jason?
Sarah.
Now that everybody is completely overwhelmed. And I think it's time that now we kind of put our heads together and say, what are we going to do? We will be hosting with WAGM and ACAP another heating telethon. That won't be till December 5th. We have done one past several years. Last year, the money went in about a month, over $100,000 of emergency assistance. We are looking at using the ALICE population to target individuals to receive this emergency assistance. And it's a one-time emergency assistance of equivalent to 100 gallons or pellets or wood, whatever heating source they use. And really targeting those people, specifically seniors and families with children in the house age 2 and under. But I'm sure all of you receive calls, many calls of people in a panic and a crisis of they don't have any heat and what are they going to do? So that's where we would kind of like to create a collective script and even a collective way of funneling money into this heating account for emergencies that we all know, instead of having people call around and explain their crisis to multiple places, we all are giving the same message of this is what you need to do. Because it's so much easier instead of listing, we'll try here, we'll try here, we'll try here. If we all have one message, it really is going to calm that individual down and really help them get the help they need that much faster. Do you want somebody in your team to explain what happens when somebody calls?
Absolutely. I think Melissa would be the ideal person to do that.
So what, currently, when someone calls, now that we're not quite in the cold yet, I know today's chilly, but we still have some warm days in the forecast. Right now, what we're doing is really vetting people, saying, we do have something available. However, when it gets to be below 0 and you give us a call, this is good. This is your one time this season. Do you really want to use that right now? Or do you want to wait? And it's a hard choice for them. Like the woman earlier who hasn't had any hot water in 3 months. She want to say, nope, I just need it and I'll figure it out later. But I give them that choice and I make it very clear, like when we get past the heating season or we're into the heating season, you get your heating assistance benefit, which is going to be around $550. And then we have your ASIP, but there's no donation because you're using it now. So we have a few people that are doing the donations. It's just myself and Heidi that approve. And then we have one person that's going in and actually creating a purchase order and sending it directly to the fuel vendor. And we try to get those as quickly as possible, but sometimes we do have to pay for that delivery fee. Sometimes they waive it. It depends on the vendor, depends on if they're going to be on that route that day. We try really hard to do a 48-hour turnaround time for deliveries. I certainly don't want somebody to be completely out of oil. But the donation, we've got a really good process with doing the fuel donations. We have, we email it, we have actually through the Empower system that he was speaking about earlier, we can actually draw down those funds. We have an exact total of how much money we have in that account and we do a drawdown. So we know at all times exactly how much money we have for that fund.
I think what's critically important as well, and we've gone back and made some changes, is it used to be you had to be at 1/8 of a tank to be in an emergency. By upping it to a quarter, I think we've alleviated some of the concerns, because when somebody waits for an eighth of a tank, we have a frugal population here, and people who are not used to living on the edge like that, if you will. By upping it to a quarter of a tank, we've been able to accomplish hopefully reducing some of that anxiety, although we are triaging those who are most in danger of running out first. The other thing that it allows us to do is by saying, if you call with a quarter of a tank, and we know that who your fuel vendor is, because we have your fuel vendor of record on notice, and you don't live in the Caribou, Presque Isle, Holton, Fort Kenner, Madawaska, where there's an oil truck on site in that community, and they go to your small rural community a day a week. Unfortunately, what happens is that if we have to roll a truck to you that in an emergency are going to run out and live in one of those small communities on a day that they're not scheduled to deliver, I believe it's $100 charge, and that comes off of the benefits. So at minimum. And ironically, part of I think the interesting part is it's your small mom and pops who obviously operate with a smaller profit margin, like your Van Buren and Telsas and organizations like that are the first to. I have myself on a Saturday morning, a couple of years ago, received a call from somebody who had my cell phone number and was in an emergency fuel situation. And they were in that coverage area, and Van Buren Telsa they called their fuel person who had just left for the day back in, sent them to do the delivery, and did not do the delivery charge. And even the driver was saying, this is, and the owner and I know her, and she said, we're doing our part for the community. And so those are the kinds of heartwarming things, and the people that were able to benefit directly. But we try to avoid at all costs any of the dollars going to anything but the actual fuel itself. And so another reason why the process it's important that we follow the process in the order that we do. And this is the reality of working with government grants as we do. But the staff time that we have working on a fuel allocation for an emergency fuel allocation, if we don't vet the community member through the HEAP process, I technically can't pay that staff member through that fund. And so by doing it that way, we're actually not using any of the dollars to administer the program. Plus, we're administering the program as saying the only thing the employee is doing is if the household is determined not eligible for that program, is just transferring to get the funds out of the donor dollars transferred over to the fuel vendor, which is a very minimal process. But if I were to say this employee is taking the call and they're going directly through a donation process and not through the home energy assistance program process, then it's a very difficult justification in terms of expenditure on salary for that staff member.
I think I've already said this and I just zoned out for a second. But if you have the wait list or you have the max number of households that you can process with HEAP, are they still able to access the ESIP if they are number like 8,000 in your call list? Like if they're on the wait list, can they still get ESIP, or do they have to use?
That's a really good question, but I believe that if they're approved, if they have a qualifying application that we have done and they're qualified, then they can access, I believe they can access.
If we have HEAP funds available, ESIP funds. Think of it as a contract with different pots of funding. We don't hold either pot. The funding comes directly from them, but we would administer or give the approval. So as long as they're approved and we have ESIP funds left. Problem is ESIP runs from November to April. So you've got a short window. People are cold now. So we have no funds to cover us until we hit our telethon and or ESIP dollars.
Yeah, as with most of our new appointments being booked out about 6-7 months, it's going to be really difficult unless they do the online application and get qualified.
That's what I was thinking. The most HEAP related calls we get are in February, generally speaking, when you likely have already hit your cap. And so I just was curious, like in theory, they'd still be, as long as they're HEAP approved, they would still be eligible for ESIP without using that pot of money first.
Right. They just need to call us.
Call you and do the-
I mean, it gets to be a as Jason will call it, whack-a-mole, and I can't believe I just.
I either refer to it as whack-a-mole or they keep hunger.
Yeah, you do. So you come in saying, I need an eSIM, and if you don't have a HEAP app certified, they'll process your HEAP app first. People often don't know whether or not it's HEAP funds or eSIM funds, your need was met.
Yeah.
So they'll always go HEAP first. Ideally, in a perfect.
And the telethon dollars are
Completely separate. Yes. Telephone dollars, we have wiggle room, right? So with this federal funded, we are very strict. Social security cards for every member of the household, proof down to a T. There is no gray. Like we are audit, it is federal regulations. Telethon dollars, we get to have the ability to say, you don't have your social security card, we're not going to penalize your family and wait 3 months before you get that. We'll help you now and give you the donation to hold you over until you can get that. That's huge. That is a barrier for so many people in the county. A lot of people will say, we get a lot of calls in from the community that say, you know, I called, or I'm not getting anywhere. It is on average, I think we have about 200 in the emergency fuel pot at a time looking to seek emergency services, not to mention 11 appointments per day per intake person. So it's tough. And we're scheduling into February right now. It's just, yeah.
So this is where everybody in the room can help with the online portal now. If you have people at your church that you know would qualify, that they don't have an appointment, please help them navigate the portal. Help them, they just need to take pictures of their documents. If you work with a family or people call, and it kind of eliminates the hundreds of calls that HACAP is receiving, opening up their phone lines a little bit more, if we all take this on together. And being able, they get so many calls for status checks. If we educate people on how they can check their own status, that helps get those real emergency calls in to be able to be answered. Because when they say they have a lot of calls, they have hundreds of calls a day.
Some Mondays when it's cold, it's over 1,000 calls an hour. And so we do our best.
It's physically not possible.
Just can't.
Our cars are routed to Tim Hortons, truly. I'm not.
We're at Tim Hortons on a cold morning in the winter, they're getting calls saying, "Is the phone system working at that end of town?"
Even if we had every single person in the agency at every one of our locations answering phones for the entire day, we would be able to answer every phone. So, but the website is on the HEAP eligibility guidelines that are in your packet, as well as all over our website, Facebook page, it's all over the place. And you can use it from your phone and computer.
I wonder if the area agency on aging's new little
Yeah.
places they have with the access points, maybe someone could help them there with these applications.
Good idea.
They're just up and running at this point, just kind of getting started, but, so they can kind of.
It's a great idea. I would hope the majority of the people already have those appointments finished or vetted in the next, because they would be priority because of their age, but definitely not all. There's always gonna be ones that fall through the cracks for new people. It's a perfect option.
And if they already have an appointment, can they still go on to the?
Yeah, absolutely. So we check every day for the people that have completed online applications, and we make sure that if they have an appointment set, we know the day and time. So we'll go in and see, does this person, because we're going to put a note in saying person completed an application online, and we'll remove that appointment that they had.
And similar to the concept that we just discussed around the Agency on Aging for families with young children that are in our care each and every day through our early care and education centers, in our partnerships with public schools. We're in public schools in Limestone, in Van Buren, and in communities in Prescott Technology Center. Our staff that work with those families have been trained to be able to do this online application, so that they can do that with those families and not have to have them come, although many of them are already HEAP customers, have either already had their HEAP appointment or will be scheduled shortly because they have children in the hypothermic category.
And another, if the money runs out and there is no availability of funds. I will say that if you have somebody call 211, there are limited funds available and resources available. So 211 is a United Way sponsored organization. So,
And that, I think, in terms of our own staff training is going to be the only other resource that we direct folks to. We want to be respectful of the fact that a number of you here in this room have been longtime supporters and send support dollars that we put into these funds. So we're not going to turn around and say, call this church or call this town or whatever the case may be. We're going to 211 Main now. Whether they do or because we're not recommending it, but whether they do or not is certainly in their purview, but we're not gonna point back.
And please, if you are getting calls and saying ACAP told me to call you, please let me know.
Call us.
Let us know so that we can stop that immediately.
I have a question. What do the heating fuel companies? There's no representative here.
We're having a meeting with them at the end of the month
Okay.
to talk about it. One of the pieces that Maine Housing is really promoting with the community is actually to educate community members on being aware of who your vendor is, what their price per gallon is, what their charges for off delivery food routes are. If the benefits are getting smaller, you need to ensure that that benefit is going entirely to this purpose. When you have to use a quarter of your benefit to go to an off-route delivery fee, when you could have had another vendor charge nothing at all, is it in your best interest? So unfortunately, I think it's going to be it's going to be interesting, but I think that's powerful for an individual to choose what is the best opportunity for them to make the biggest bang of their buck in a sense, and they need to be educated to do that. So that's going to be a big push. So we will be having conversations with vendors to let them know of the changes. In regards to educating the community about choosing a vendor and know their off-route delivery fees, know what their extra charges are, select appropriately. But also to be aware of the new process, what the fuel year is going to look like and how, our emergency delivery team will work with their staff.
That might be helpful to us. You decide we can help somebody. And then when they say, well, we use, one of the big guys all the time, that's who we use. And we're like, well, we could do this small town guy who's not gonna charge that fee.
So is there a possibility, or I'm curious, I'm sorry, I'm not sure where you're with in regard to Trademark District. Are we vetting to see if there's a possibility that they've already received fuel first? So somebody's contacting fuel assistance and speaking to us, our team.
Contacting the fuel company. Sometimes they even have credits at the fuel companies.
Right, yeah. So that's one thing that I would be cautious of, because if you haven't, and that's where it gets really hairy, because without a release of information, we can't really divulge that. But if I could tell you, if you called me and said, hey, can you tell me where Sally is? And I know Sally's a week out, save your money, because it is not worth using your money when I have Harry, who is, I don't know why I just went there, but who is 3 weeks out from getting it. He's actually in an emergency, not Sally. You see what I'm saying? That's where you kind of have to play, I don't want to say a game, but the reality, that is the reality. That's why if there is a possibility and you're with an organization who says, I'm going to commit this amount of money for this need, is there a potential for us to partner so we fill those needs with you?
And thankfully, Framework has been first in all.
I recognize you guys say with birth certificates and getting people leases for rents, just for you to know that. I appreciate it all the time. But that is one of the things where are we playing the smartest way we possibly can? Because if I could tell you, I know somebody who got a donation from 3 separate churches and then used all 3 of my pots of funding. That's way to survive. But at the same token, is that spreading it everywhere else for all of that needs to do that? So is there an opportunity for us to explore how we can partner better to ensure we're using the federal dollars first as much as possible, which the needs are being met, and banning that dollar out because we don't have a choice?
I like, as you're talking about the different pots connecting together, finding a single source of communication, how are we communicating together? Like we get calls all the time still for help. They do often say ACAP help, but when I call them, have you gone to ACAP? Yes, they can't help.
which is fascinating because I will do trade phone calls all the time and they get some calls.
But Ken,
Drives me crazy.
so I didn't realize until you just said it, that we could actually call here to actually get some of that. So that's not a HIPAA violation.
You give
We're
me
allowed to
permission,
share.
they give me permission or sign a release of information and I will share anything on their behalf. They give me permission to do that.
Perfect. So we can make that a requirement here that they give permission, release from information on ACAP
Absolutely.
in order for us to
Correct.
do that. Okay, that helps a lot.
How long would that take?
As long as it takes them to sign it. They just need to sign the release.
So I would rather have your requests come to Melissa and I than going to the regular straight line who has 1,000 of return phone calls. I can do some pregame back work and fix that need. Than there being money that is not spent as wisely as it could be to stretch as far as we can.
I can say
Obviously-
I probably contact them on a weekly basis and they have it with that day. They've made that.
So does ACAP have their own release that you need signed?
We
Would
do
it
have
make sense?
a general release of information.
I think I have one, for you guys, but would it be good to just send it to the local churches and other organizations so they have it?
I mean, in a perfect world, and this is, I guess, where I would question. Is there hesitancy to not being the one supplying the fuel directly yourselves? Does that make sense? So if you took care of every other need that the community member ever asked of, except for fuel, could you do that or no, you want to absolutely help with fuel too?
Well, we did that for a while through
Yep.
Andy helping.
Yes. Yes.
So that, I mean, that was something we partnered with for a long time.
Yeah.
Anytime people called us, we sent them to Andy, and of course, that program finished. And after that, a lot of the churches actually had the pastors were on a group together so that we could try to communicate, has this person asked, has this person asked? And so we tried to vet a lot of that stuff. But I would say that after, as these programs have increased, at least our church anyway, has seen a significant decrease in calls. I mean, massively significant decrease in calls. And so whether or not that's just because we're pushing people to Andy or because these programs came up, I'm not sure, but I can't speak for Framework. That was certainly the case.
So Andy's program used to receive a very small amount from the Department of Health and Human Services. And when that funding expired, the reason why the telethon on WHEM is called the Helping Hands Telethon is that we've tried to carry forward that work.
Yeah.
That's why we held these conversations. It's been 9 years now or 8 years since that program dissolved, and we've sort of picked up and taken on that mission because we would normally in the past have transferred somebody for providing Andy with an office space and phone here and in charge. But when that program ended, we committed to continuing it. As a matter of fact, some of the board members continue to serve on one of our advisory councils as a legacy to making sure that work continues.
Yeah, and we used to give directly to that. That is not the case anymore since it's shifted and it's become a United Way and ACAP program. But that's, I don't think we'd be far off from that because you're right. I mean, you guys are the ones who get the full opportunity to vet. But there's certainly situations
Absolutely.
emergency situations that I think that we can need to go out and do that.
Sure.
Not everyone.
As long as we have as long as we have the permission to share, I'll give anything, but it is a confidentiality piece. Like I cannot go, obviously, I'd love to and say, but it makes it hard. I can say that that's a really big challenge in putting yourself in the position of the person who's calling around to seek assistance and calling literally the phone book of every single faith-based organization, and getting $50 here and $50 here and $100 here. There's got to be a way that we can work together more to fix that need and not have that worry on that individual. Because I can't imagine what it'd be like calling all of those individuals repeatedly over and over and sharing the story 50 times.
It does require intestinal fortitude, and I hate to say it, I mean, I'm a lecturer at Holy Rosary. And so I'm saying that for the purpose of when I read in the announcements, I'm asked to read and I get down to the 7th announcement and it's thanks to your support to the Helping Our People Eagerly Fund, we were able to help a family with XYZ. And I'm like, why did they use those dollars? Because we could have helped that family with XYZ. And I'm like thinking this is just, and so like I struggle with that, but I understand that the reality is that folks in a challenging situation reach out and it's wherever they can get that first, most immediate help, right? So.
And it's really hard to say no.
Yeah.
I'm the worst person in the room probably. Because when I have an older woman who says, well, if you find me dead tomorrow, I'll frozen to death. I mean, I want to go just. But, so it is hard to respond in emergency situations.
Or do I understand you saying that you want us to send people your way, or you want?
We always want people to be sent our way. We always want to use federal funds first before you use your raised funding from your congregation.
What we're saying, I think beyond that is if you're having somebody who's calling you and saying, and you're saying, we're working with ACAP, can you call ACAP? And they're saying to you, Marilyn, we've called ACAP and we haven't gotten help. That's where we're saying we need your help to flag those to Melissa and Heidi. Because if we're falling down and we're failing on that, we need to figure out where in the system that's happening, and we can take that customer's name and trace to see, have they called? If they called, whose phone do they go into, so that we can make sure that we're being responsive to those needs or what the situation is. And in some cases, come back to you and say, Marilyn, that household has received their heat benefit this year. They have received the emergency benefit through the federal program, and we have provided them with a donation. They have come to the well 3 times, and that is all that we can do for them this particular season.
And then it would be up to us if we decided we wanted to do anything more, or would you suggest that we hold off on this individual that has already received?
I think that's a determination you make. Because quite frankly, if someone has gone 3 times, I can tell you how I process it if you want to know.
Well, what is that 3 times look like? Is it $1,500? Like if it's 550 plus 750 plus an
Absolutely.
emergency? So at that point, you're looking at least $1,500 of assistance, just to put a dollar amount to it.
And that household would have certainly been offered at their.
That's the
emergency.
biggest piece, is where I was going to go, because it's a lot different between saying, this is your financial situation right now, and if there is nobody working in an adult or working in the household, and we try to offer workforce services and it's just down not refused, I'm going to be, quite frankly, sorry, block your ears, more aggressive to help somebody who's trying to improve their system all the way around than someone saying, I choose not to. And I know that information because I have a system with 43 different programs that talk to each other. I can see it all in one shot.
So we're gonna make sure, in other words, Marilyn, that if this household is calling in their family with young children, that if they're not a part of the WIC program, that we can get them involved in the WIC program. If they're in need of workforce development, we want to get them into workforce development services. And then if we can, and whether they're help to go to Northern Maine Community College or to complete their high set, or directly into the workforce, then that we're connecting them with available resources and Head Start, early Head Start, or child care, depending on available slots. That's the other project that we're working with United Way on. Really, it's might be the third bite of the proverbial apple, if you will, but we're gonna say, okay, buy the emergency fuel it typically triggers. We need to sit down with this household and we need to talk about, can we get them enrolled in the coaching program with A16 so that we can get the weatherization implementation in there. And then the benefits that come with that, and the financial literacy component and the workforce training, all of those things.
All of these extra services are offered for individuals who access more. So if they're getting services from you and you and you, and we have no idea, we can't provide that extra support for those long-term adjustments that could make the difference between them no longer coming after us in an emergency situation again.
So not to get too wonky into it, Marilyn, but as somebody who used to live right next door to Coolville, the work that we've taken on is that for families with young children enrolled our early care and education programs here at ACAP, in our adoption of what we call the whole family approach, we measure those households regularly across 17 different domains, from food security to housing security to energy security to financial literacy to how much they can save. In addition to all of the educational and social emotional milestones of the children in the classroom, to ensure that they're optimally ready for transition into public school. In addition, and we measure those on a crisis to thriving scale on a 1 to 5, and we sit down and we do that with the household on a regular basis. And we look at what are the areas where your family is really in crisis and where are you thriving? And then we try to work on the areas where they're in crisis to move them closer to thriving, right? While we're doing that and our coaches are working with the households on each of those developmental milestones, we're working also to look at what constitutes their income. Their state and federal government supports income versus earned income. And what we're able to do is over an 18-month period of working with these households, we actually see those scores on the Crisis to Thrive scale vastly improve. And while those are improving, when the family's not worried about actually putting food on the table for their children, then we can start to talk to them and think about, would you like to go check out Northern Maine Community College or your local adult education, or can we help you get into workforce with childcare and the like? And then in the 18-month time span, you actually see those federal government supports decrease and their earned income increase in the household. And that's how we're trying to revolutionize the way that we do the approach in the whole family approach, where we're working with the parents or the caregivers, because altogether too often, unfortunately, with the opioid epidemic and other challenges, it's grandparents that are raising grandchildren or other caregivers that are raising children. And so by working comprehensively with the entirety of the family at the same time, we're able to help improve their social and economic well-being. And if you can't tell, I'm a little bit passionate about that work.
So if we have questions or if we're looking to figure out how to partner beyond this meeting, who's the best person to get a hold of?
Certainly, I would be happy to speak with you, and then
He's just gonna toss you to us.
that makes it sound like I'm, but no,
We can relate.
if we're looking at whole family approach, I will likely connect you with members of our team on that. If we're talking specifically about an energy related assistance program, I probably bring Melissa. So it's best if you want to communicate directly with me, and I'll ensure that the right people are at the table. Like we're talking about families overall, I'll bring WIC into the equation. We want to bring workforce into the equation, coaching. That's great. So
Sarah had mentioned like a community script, and then it also sounded like you kind of want us to direct folks your way. So is there something, I don't need like word for word, I can handle a conversation, but like a checklist or a quick like intake that you want, if somebody calls my office, and do you want me to say, have you talked to ACAP? Have you used these funds? Who have you spoken to? Like, is there something you want the group to do?
My question would be, can I flip this a little bit?
Sure.
Somebody calls you and says, I need fuel.
Mhm.
What are you going to say?
First, I will say, have you talked to ACAP?
Yeah, I have. They're not responding to my answers.
roll with
Oh,
I would like to pause the role play, then I'll play it with you to say, I've never had someone say, yes, I would, yes, I did, and they haven't helped me and had it been accurate. I always want to start.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Oh, okay, well, who have you spoken to?
I don't remember her name.
Oh, yeah. Did you leave them a message? Did you send them an email?
Yeah, I have. They just haven't responded.
They haven't responded. Okay. Have you gone in person? No, you haven't? Or do you lack transportation? You just haven't been in?
I don't have transportation to get there.
Oh, you don't have transportation. Okay. Well, how about I do this? I'm happy to make a quick call. I can put you on hold and I'll actually connect you right to the folks at ACAP. Are you wanting to do that? They can.
Perfect. Beautiful. Now,
Yeah.
what if I say, yes, they've given me everything they can. What are you going to do now?
Generally speaking, I say, okay, that's really helpful to know. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. Would you mind if I take your information? I'll give you a call back.
Okay.
I then call Heidi back. Solved all my problems.
On these real quick.
I just appreciate she did it on the spot.
I do it a lot. If you haven't noticed.
Would anybody else like to?
I think the question becomes as to whether or not the community decides, individual faith-based groups decide that they want to be in a position to offer that assistance. If somebody says, I don't want to touch fuel, there's 500 other needs, and I have this context, and I'm going to vet, and I'm going to say, Heidi, I need you to screen this person, make sure that they have had all the assistance, and I can do that, I'm going to put it in that person's hands. And I know that you don't know me, and I know you maybe the agency, but I can spit out numbers and demographics, show you every town, like every single penny, where it went in 5 seconds. And it's one system that is not going to ensure that it didn't go to 5 different places. I struggle with that. Now, if you say, I've got $3,000 and I'm sorry, ACAP, we love you, but we don't trust you. And we want to be able to do this on the heat of a dime, then your script's going to be very different from the church who said, I'm going to give you my $3,000 because, and I'm going to call you every single time somebody comes to verify.
And it's a very difficult thing, and I struggle with it because the church I go to did for 2 years, and then they came to me and they said, but people are calling us and
They're going to call you.
It's
not gonna stop.
Yes, okay, and where is the challenge? Well, you're not helping them, and I'm like, okay, are you asking the questions? It's people who don't want to go through the process of the paperwork and the like, and so, again, it goes back to my comment earlier about the intestinal fortitude. And I understand that some folks just want to say, gosh, I hear those stories and I really want to really help, and I want to help right now, and I just want to.
But it's not helping the long term. And unfortunately, what it's creating is a disaster because people are choosing to go the easy route instead of the hard route, which is federal money that is coming in regardless. So if I can get 100 gallons of oil from you because I give you my story, which is really sad and heartbreaking, I get it. And I'm not minimizing that. All because they didn't want to go to the Social Security office and get a Social Security card. That is sometimes what it comes down to. Like, it's just hard.
And that's kind of something you can do with the online portal now, is if you contact Heidi, she says they're missing a Social Security card. Maybe that's, you help them, support them, get that card so they can get things.
And Melissa, we are improving on that as a result of these interoperable data systems, right? So we get a Social Security card this year, we got one last year, it's on record in the system. And so we're not asking for that documentation year after year.
Correct. We could duplicate most things. We can even take old social security income documents and just add the cost of living adjustment. What we can't take are old expired IDs, which is difficult, especially for people with transportation barriers and elderly that just don't have the ability to get to the only DMV in the county, especially if they live very far away. But there are like a bunch of documents from list A and then list B, like one from A, one from B that they can upload. So maybe just helping them navigate that, and that's right on the website. And it's also on I believe on our Facebook, also the list of documents that they need. Help them do that instead of just saying, okay, here's the oil, because most of the time we can help them first.
Would there ever be the opportunity for you all to say, okay, funds are getting real tight? Can you help this individual?
So one of the things that we have talked about with Sarah and have asked Sarah to consider in terms of convening as we get into the thick of the heating season is to say every other week, we're going to put in a Zoom call together that anybody, churches, municipalities or whatever can get on to share with us. These are the challenges that we're facing. And for us to say, this is where we stand in the heating season, we can provide the update on here's where we are at with the donor dollars that have been extended so far, what communities they've gone to. We'll protect obviously the household names, but we can show you what communities the funds are going to and the like, and how they're being expended. And so if we hear from the church in Madawaska that, gosh, we're getting tons and tons of calls, and we're showing Madawaska's, having 3 people that got emergency fuel in the last month. We can say, okay, well, let's figure out what's happening with our Madawaska office because something is going wrong. So that rapid feedback loop. So I don't want to speak for Sarah, but we had asked in a conversation that we had, gosh, in the course of the summer with a couple of churches who had asked what's happening with this. And we said, we're going to hold these greater forums, but we started the conversation and we asked them at that point, would that be helpful? It's not something you have to attend every month, but it's something that Gloria Duncan, working with Sarah, can put out there. And we can just hold an open, Zoom meeting with our folks and share with you where we're at. And then you can say, gosh, we're really seeing an uptick in calls here. This is happening. Help us figure out and help us triage. And we can say, okay, well, this is what we're doing. This is what's happening. This is where the challenges are.
But other needs too.
Yeah.
If you're getting an increased calls for food or anything, somewhere we can discuss and find a solution.
In this pilot program that Melissa was talking about last year, where we basically just focused on families with young children who are coming to us, and we said wherever we're going to centralize their appointments on specific days and specific communities for heat. And then we're gonna, because we don't have a huge staff, we're gonna wrap all of our services into that center on that day. So WIC, workforce development, early care and education, all of those services so that they can move from one to another and get it all done in that one visit. We added 70 Aroostook County households to the WIC roles because WIC is a higher income eligibility than HEAP. So if you were qualifying for HEAP, you were certainly going to qualify for WIC. You actually had a more liberal income guidelines there. And there's been a lot of misunderstandings through our family coaching work that we found out. When I first joined the agency 9 years ago now, I looked at the data and I said, the number of families with young children under the age of 6 enrolling in the home energy assistance program has dropped precipitously. It's dropped below or quicker than our actual population has dropped in that category. I want to understand what is going on here. Why is that population dropping out of the home energy assistance program? There was a lot of fear mongering happening at that time around institutions, around welfare and government and the like, and households were actually incorrectly believing that they had to choose one or the other. That if they chose HEAP, that their food benefit, their SNAP benefit would decrease, or vice versa. And the actual reality of the situation is we had to sit down with some households that we were coaching and actually allow a couple to do a test with us, where if they applied for the home energy assistance program and they received it, the HEAP benefit, the SNAP benefit actually went up a little bit, not down. And so we were actually having households that were struggling for no reason. And when you're in that kind of a position where you're really fearing that your family's either going to be cold or hungry or both, that's not an environment to think about how can I go to work. Unfortunately, it's Maslow's hierarchy, right? It's you're living with your basic needs not being met, and you want to ensure that your family is going to just survive.
What about the people in between? You've got your seniors and you've got your children. What about the ones in between those?
Well, yep, so that's a great point. So our telethon funds are prescribed, our partners determine what's the best need. We can't meet the needs. There's no way. So how do you determine what is the best that you can get off? And it's the individuals most vulnerable to hypothermic temperatures is what they focused on this year. And so individuals who have not received several bites of the apple is what they like to call it. So maybe not qualified for HEAP or ESIP, and they have no other resource. That's 100 gallons. Or again, those vulnerable temperatures, ages. As far as the other population, the federal funds still exist, and it's situational, right? So it's dependent on the dollars that we get from the donors as to how those are going to be used. If we have dollars that are given to someone who says, I want these funds to go to specifically this need, we're going to hold that accountable. So same with our partners, like with the telethon. So we're hoping that our working age people have the ability to access our STEAM program and to have the resources that are available within the agency to offset those expenses. Like Jason was saying, your WIC services, your things. It might not be a fuel benefit, but it can offset the expenses to alleviate other funds for you to use that elsewhere. I will tell you, it's a really hard, I am obsessed with data. And one of the things we found is that we have a percentage of individuals we've done an intake with, 50% of the population coming in for appointments is disabled. And we wonder why we're having a workforce problem, because half of the population we're seeing is either going for disability or straight out disabled. So
You want to hear on those too? Is that what you're saying?
I want everybody, but I'm not going to always be able to serve everybody. The reality is, push comes to shove, we can't. There's not enough to go around. So how do you pick and choose? How do you figure out? And it's like I said, unfortunately, you make those really hard decisions where you say, you've had 3 bites of the apple, this person hasn't had 1 bite. And it's about equity and equality, right? So do you give somebody 3 boxes to step at the same height or 1 box? And that's where you've got to start considering. We have conversations with people, if they're in homes and they cannot afford their fuel bill, this might be a time for us to consider alternative housing. those are hard conversations. Nobody wants to have their grandmother leave their house. But if you are on social security and you're the only person left in your household and your income is not paid to supply your fuel bill, let alone your mortgage, how are you going to survive? Us giving you 100 gallons now is not gonna fix the situation long term.
And our telethon dollars do have a higher
Threshold. We did go up to 300% of poverty, which is pretty darn high. Specifically trying to cap those that don't qualify for HEAP.
Yeah, Marilyn.
But last year, I'll be truthfully honest with you, we had no cap. We had somebody call in that makes over 100 grand. It said, you said no cap. I had to give it to them. And I was like, never doing that again. So,
But the levels are pretty high. The levels
yes,
are
230% of
But
poverty.
that's the main, that's capped at the cost of living. Like, not comfortably, but able to afford your basic necessities.
And
That
there are,
actually kind of blew my mind, because I pretty much qualify, so.
You have out-of-pocket medical expenses.
That-
You can lower
Yeah.
your income.
but I would say, Marilyn, I think you're circling in on something, and we've had some really, really pointed and good conversations with policymakers and leaders about there's a level of brokenness to the system that unfortunately, and we had a great conversation right here in this room with Jordan's boss just a few weeks ago with Senator King, who was visiting here. I was meeting with Senator Collins last Thursday afternoon in Caribou. We had this same conversation about what's called the welfare cliff. And what's really unfortunate is that we've set up systems in such a way that for a household, and our sister cap in Kennebec County actually did a study on this, that for a household that we're working to get working age adults into the workforce with, if those workforce individuals are getting in at entry level positions, so minimum wage or just barely above minimum wage, that it's going to take them on average 10 years to be economically better off working than it would be for them to remain on systems and structures of support. And so when we're working diligently at our agency to try to get people into workforce or to get people into education and training, they oftentimes will fall back and not persist because it actually costs them more to go to work. There are transportation issues, and then there's I don't want to get on my soapbox, but that got, if we can get access to childcare, the financial burden of households on childcare just got a lot less with some of the opportunities the states are providing. But the awful challenge that we face, and when Heidi says I talk about playing the game of whack-a-mole, is when a household or a family comes to us, calls us, walks in the door and says, I'm working, but my car's broken down and I can't afford to fix it. It's just not in the budget. I had to get new tires and new brakes and it cost me $1,600 last week, and unexpected. I can't imagine somebody who doesn't have, it's gonna take me a few months to pay that off on my credit card, but I'm gonna be able to do it, right?
You have a credit card.
I have a credit card, right? But for a family that's not possible for, and this was one of the things that it was getting my vehicle inspected. So it was a requirement of the inspection. If they can't do that and they come to our doors and they're already working, but working in a minimum wage environment, our ability to get them into workforce development, which would allow us to help them pay for that vehicle, is very limited, if at all, because they won't qualify for that program because they're actually employed. And for us to turn around and to say, gosh, there's no other program that we can provide those car repairs for. Let's see, are you in WIC or are you in HEAP? And we're going to try to get you into those programs if you're not, so that in theory, we can help you save for the repairs of your car. But by the 6 week or 8 weeks that you saved up to actually pay for those car repairs, because what we've displaced in heating or food costs for you, you've lost your job because you have meals bill because your car is not operable.
Yeah.
We're defeating the purpose, right? So.
The car repair program is one of the programs that United Way is looking at creating.
And so what we're looking at, there's actually a piece of legislation right now that's being considered. It was proposed by our own Senator Collins and Senator Martin Heinrich, who's a Democrat from New Mexico, called the Two-Generation Economic Empowerment Act. And it would require a forced study of federal government programs that have left people in the lurch as a result of. This is why in healthcare, when I was working at Northern Light Air Cooled Hospital, this was one of the areas where a patient that had multiple conditions and Medicare or Medicaid would actually be able to be enrolled in a program where they have a nurse case manager that's working with them to help them stay out of the emergency room, which is the higher end cost of things, right? And to get their work through primary care and the like. And I think we need to come to that in terms of the environment of social services and welfare in this country, where we're being able to provide those immediate supports in the areas that are needed most, so that we can get people to sustain employment. Sorry, that's another soapbox.
We could stay on soapboxes all day.
I know, one to the other. Probably Sherry has to come with the hook hitch. Anything else, folks? I know that Jordan's taking copious notes, and obviously I take this information back, and we are having those conversations. We as a community action agency aren't in the business of advocacy and obviously not lobbying, because we're recipients of federal programs and funds and are charged to administer them. But I can tell you that each and every day with people like Heidi and Melissa and the great partners like Sarah and United Way, that we're really doing things that other parts of the country are actually paying attention to. We had this summer people fly in from Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota, Northeast Kingdom of Vermont drove here, and Kansas City and other CAP agencies are coming to see how we do things differently, and we're being seen as a national example. So I'm awful proud of people who work for our agency every day. Thank you all for your kind time and attention and staying with us through this meeting. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And certainly the basis of our message here today is that we'll get through this winter. It's not going to be easy, but with our approach of neighbors helping neighbors here in Aroostook County, we'll make it happen. And we want to be your partners in ensuring that people make it through this winter in the best way possible, because it will be a challenging one. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.